Buff Nation, we are live. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Hope you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl, everything with that, Usher, the performance. But I am starting the week off great with my good friend Steven Hamner here from QB Spotlight. It's been a while, Steven. How you doing, man?
I know, dude. I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to jump on and talk some quarterbacks. As always, the best position in sports.
Exactly. Most definitely. We saw, another great performance yesterday from Patrick Mahomes. But before we get into the Super Bowl a little bit, with any of my new viewers that have just discovered the channel, maybe over the last month or so, haven't seen us collaborate before, but would love for you to give a quick intro, Steven, about your background and what you do and what QB Spotlight is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we work with a bunch of MLB and NFL guys in like the sports performance field. It's a lot of speed and strength and conditioning. But then played former college football, former college quarterback, not very successful. I'll add. Anyone that's seen me talk before knows my only touchdown was to the other team. If that tells you how good I was in college, but we stay in the field, and so we run QB Spotlight, which is a channel we talk all things college quarterbacks, and we do some film breakdowns. We just cover the whole like college quarterback landscape, if you will, and topics and news. And we also have a podcast where we have current and former college quarterbacks and pro guys, college guys come on and talk shop. So if quarterbacks are kind of your thing or you're interested in college football, give us go over the channel and check it out.
Yeah, y'all definitely give a subscribe to QB Spotlight. Link is in the description of my video over here. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk briefly about the Super Bowl, man. As a lifelong Broncos fan, man, the result was tough, but nonetheless, I think a pretty entertaining game. Whenever it goes to overtime, that's always entertaining. But man, any specific thoughts? Whether it's Kyle Shanahan, choosing to not defer with the new overtime rules, or the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, how he going back-to-back Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill somehow. I don't understand it, but it is what it is. What did you think of the game yesterday?
Yeah, man, super fun. I'm not like a huge NFL fan, but of course I'm watching the Super Bowl, keeping up with stuff. I didn't know the new overtime rules either, so I probably can't be too judgmental or harsh on the decisions. But Patrick Mahomes, you always knew deep down inside, like whenever they got that field goal in overtime, I was like, there's no way the 49ers are winning this game. I thought maybe there's a chance, but it's they talked on the broadcast, it's that Brady effect, it's that Michael Jordan effect. You just knew he was going to win. At least I kind of felt like that, and probably most of everyone watching.
Felt like it was kind of inevitable, especially after that missed extra point or blocked extra point or whatever. You cannot leave points on the field against great quarterbacks like that. That it will always come back to bite. That also that muff punt as well. I just remember that. So you could say that was like an 8-point swing right there off of special teams. Crazy.
Watching McCaffrey is so fun too, by the way. I know they didn't win, but he is just so fun to watch. It's incredible.
I know, man. I love Christian McCaffrey. It was very weird to hear Tony Romo refer to him as like, most people think he's a scat back. I was like, that is not true. He's awesome. But I felt like he had a pretty good performance yesterday. I wish, again, hindsight's 2020. I wish Kyle Shanahan went to him a little bit more often in the clutch, but hopefully he can get back there and get a Super Bowl. But man, I was rooting hard for the Niners, but it is what it is. We're here to talk about college football. We're here to talk about the quarterback position. And I think we got a lot of exciting things to look forward to with the Buffs this year. Obviously, since we last connected, they're bringing in some new weapons. LeJontay Wester for Shedeur over at coming over from FAU. We got Will Shepard coming in here from Vanderbilt. But right now, I saw that you've been working on putting out some different Shedeur videos, film breakdowns right now. what are some of the things that you're touching on in terms of Shedeur, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think with Shedeur, like the game that they had success, obviously it goes, let's say, the offensive line issues or the sack issues. I'm sure if he wasn't the most sacked quarterback in college football, I'm sure he was one of the most. You probably know that answer. But I think the games that they had success on, they're able to utilize the whole field, meaning they're able to spread the ball, not just like underneath or to the side or the middle, but they took shots downfield. So, for example, like TCU, his yards per attempt were 10 point something. Nebraska, it was 9 point something. USC, Stanford, games they lost, but they played well offensively, is like 8 point something range. Every other game was under 8 besides like Washington State, which is kind of an anomaly. And so I think when the field shrank, there was no deep threat. Like Oregon and UCLA, his yards per attempt passing were under 5, right? So there's just no threat. The defense didn't care. Like they knew he wasn't going to push the ball downfield. And so I think if you can just get to a path and to a way where like the TCU game is kind of like it's unrealistic to repeat on an everyday basis, right? Like 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, 10 yards per attempt. Like the USCs and the Stanfords, if that can be like the norm where you're 8 yards per attempt and you're having the 300-400 yard games, I think that's like the next step for them as an offense. So a lot of it obviously wasn't even Shedeur's fault, but I think the big things that stand out was the success he had despite like all the chaos around, right? Not just the pressure, but the offensive coordinator stuff, behind the scenes stuff that's like over my head, but still he was like the like the go-to guy everyone kind of looked to. And so it was almost like the past few like diving into some of the film, like you still see the intangibles as far as like reading the defenses, processing defenses. It just maybe wasn't shown on display as much once it got kind of chaotic. Does that kind of make sense? Like the field just shrank whenever you can't push the ball downfield, and then that the offense is really limited. But despite that, so many good things to take away in 2023.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about how he broke, the single school passing record with everything that was going on, 56 sacks, taking all those hits. We're very lucky that he didn't end the season a lot more banged up than he was. No, he had a fractured bone somewhere in his back, but it could have been a lot worse with how many hits he ended up taking, the damage that occurred throughout the season. But nonetheless, like a very impressive season from Shedeur. And
he's still, not to interrupt, but he's only threw like I think 3 picks, which usually if you're under that much duress, it's going to be more interceptions. Right? I think his TD to interception ratio is like something stupid, like 9-1 or 8-1, something crazy, right? You probably have the stats at the top of your head, but like the fact he didn't turn the ball over, I think kind of speaks also to like the decision making ability that he has.
No doubt. And excuse me, I'm hoping that with new offensive line coming in, that we can cut those sacks, around in half. It depends on how much we throw the ball, right? But I'm hoping that we can have a substantial jump in pass protection, because I really think Shedeur just needs that much more time, and we'll see this offense really start to hum. But I'm curious on, from your perspective, Steven, Shedeur spoke this last week at Radio Row, talking a little bit about his experience in the offense this past year with Sean Lewis and kind of what he's looking forward to working with Pat Shurmur. He said a lot of the plays that they're initially running were very choice route heavy for the quarterback or for the wide receivers. So he would have to sit back there and hold the ball for another extra split second because, he couldn't trust himself to anticipate at the level that he wanted yet. Again, that kind of makes sense working with all new receivers pretty much, except Travis Hunter. But I'm curious from the college perspective, your time working with quarterbacks or your time as a quarterback, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages for running plays that have those choice routes incorporated?
Yeah, I think so. In college, we had a bunch of option routes. Even late high school, we had option routes. It's kind of like forward-thinking stuff. And you talked to a lot of NFL guys, of course, there's option routes. But I think it's like it's how you kind of mentioned it's being on the same page with your receivers and kind of having those reps and knowing that like this receiver knows exactly what he's supposed to do with this coverage. and I can trust him. And so, to Shedeur's point, it kind of seemed like maybe the offense wasn't, maybe maybe it was better placed for like a different offense, right? Or like maybe it wasn't like a feasible offense to be able to have a bunch of option routes, or at least to like build their plays on option routes. And so it seemed like, at least I just caught the clip, it seemed like they wanted more kind of like set determined routes. I won't speak too much into negatives, positives there, but as far as like the options go, like typically your slot receivers and your running backs will have choice routes, option routes. And so we would call it like an umbrella, right? So say if your slot receiver, he has an umbrella of routes he can potentially run, depending on the scheme and depending on what the outside receiver is doing. So the umbrella just means he has the option to run a straight seam, to run a post, to run a dig, or to run a corner, or to run an out. So it kind of makes that umbrella, if you will. And so depending on what, depending on what the safety is doing, they may have the open, like if it's a cover one, you're probably running a corner route or an out, right? Depending on what the corner is doing. If it's two, then you're running a dig, or you're running a post, more middle of the field, for like lack of better terms. And so I think if you're not on the same page, it can be a really complex probably offense to run if like receivers aren't sure what they should be doing. Quarterback's like, man, I just wish I knew I had a post or seam. I think that's kind of what Shedeur was getting at. So right, wrong, I don't know. I'm not in the system, I'm not in the schemes, but that's kind of the option route. So it can be obviously a great advantage as a quarterback or receiver, but can, I guess, also be, maybe not if not everyone's on the same page. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
That does make sense. That totally makes sense. It also sounds like this isn't a concept that should just be totally scrapped, right? Like out of Pat Shurmur playbook. Like, right. I imagine we're still going to call them, but maybe it won't be to the level that we saw this past year. I'm guessing it's kind of hard for me to go through and identify like what routes in all these plays were choice routes or not, or option routes. I don't know, but I imagine that, hey, even if you're just limiting a little bit on what your choices are as a receiver, or just being a little bit more particular about when you're calling plays like that, surely you can still have a lot of success with those. Again, if we used a lot of that against TCU, Shedeur broke the school single game passing record doing that whole thing. But what are you kind of expecting with Pat Shurmur working with Shedeur this year?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to almost the offense at Jackson State. Maybe I remember watching Jackson State film before he went to Colorado, and it was decisive throws. The ball was getting out quick. The plays weren't taking as long to develop. So maybe that's what Shedeur is kind of getting at, because some of these option plays can take a while to develop. You got guys out of the backfield that have choice routes that don't take that long, but still some of those deeper option routes can take some time to develop. So I'm thinking maybe more like pick and roll type throws, right? Where you just have a slant and then an out going kind of behind the receiver. And so that's what I have no idea, but just from like putting together tea leaves and seeing what has worked, like it just makes sense to get the ball out quick, especially when you've had some issues. So that's what I'm kind of thinking, getting the ball out quick, maybe some behind the line of scrimmage type throws, and maybe not focusing on pushing the ball as deep and knowing that will come. So I think you want that to come as in an offense, but you got to have time and completions first.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, I got a question for you too. This is the big title of the video, whatnot. Shedeur Sanders, is he the number one pick in the 2025 draft? Of course, we're over a year out from seeing how this whole thing plays out, but I think right now, with the rest of the quarterbacks coming back into college, I mean, Shedeur said it himself and caught some flack for this. I think, he's saying, I'm biased, but I think I'm the best quarterback or something along those lines. I know that we got down in Austin where you're at, we got Quinn Ewers. Out in Georgia, we got Carson Beck. I guess we'll see how Will Howard and some of these other quarterbacks end up doing. But outside of Shedeur, who would you say are those other top quarterbacks projecting to be a high pick in the NFL draft in 2025.
Yeah, I think right now you hit probably the top two with Carson Beck at Georgia and Quinn Ewers at Texas. Those are probably the two favorites to go 1 and 2. I would guess. You got Cam Ward transferring into Miami,
right.
so he's a potential if he blows up and has a great season. Who knows? Maybe DJU from Oregon State to FSU blows up and has a Jordan Travis type season. So I think like you don't have necessarily like bona fide like heavy hitters. I think like you kind of do in this year's draft, and I'm not great like with the draft stuff, but like this year you had Caleb Williams and Drake May. You had like two top guys that you knew, hey, this is 1 and 2, and then the rest would kind of blend in. So, but I'm sure we'll have a quarterback that has like a Jaden Daniels like performance, right? Where like he just kind of took a huge next step, and he was the best quarterback in college football, right? So, yeah, those are kind of my guys. Like, if you want to talk about Big 12 quarterbacks, you got obviously Shedeur, then you got Cam Rising, then Noah Fifta from Arizona. I mean, the Pac-12 schools probably have the best quarterbacks going into the Big 12. At least from at least as of right now. So those are probably, man, this is not a bona fide like number one Q, I don't think. So yeah, Shedeur could definitely take it, but so could one of the guys we mentioned, or some guy that we haven't even mentioned yet, right? So that's what kind of makes this quarterback kind of season coming up interesting, because there's not just like one guy that's like head and shoulders above anyone else.
Yeah, definitely. I think that in order for Shedeur to get that first overall pick, I think obviously CU's got to have a good year this year, winning record, go to a bowl game, something like that. And then, of course, we got to see him continuing to, put up stats. Now, they don't need to be like world-breaking stats or anything like that. I don't think he needs 5,000 yards or 4,500 yards passing or anything like that. But if we can continue to see the development, the progression, and to see him kind of correct and fine-tune maybe some of his areas of growth. Right now, with taking a look at Shedeur, are there anything is there anything that comes to mind in terms of one or two things that you think he should be working on, getting ready for this season?
Yeah. I think it kind of comes back to just finding ways to get the ball out quicker, right? Like obviously the offensive line was an issue, but when an offensive line becomes an issue as a quarterback, sometimes you just hold on the ball too long, even when like you do have time. You're so used to getting sacked and hit that maybe you're a little bit hesitant, right? So, so I just think it's finding ways to get rid of the ball quicker. I remember even watching the what was the Coach Prime show. I'm sure y'all watch. But if you listen to some like the behind the scenes stuff that Prime's talking, he's even talking to Shedeur. So like, hey, you got to get rid of the ball. You just got to find a way to get rid of the ball. Maybe not to those exact words I said, but to the point. So I think it's just getting rid of the ball quick and not having to wait for that home run hit, if you will. I think also the next step for Shedeur to potentially get drafted, that high would be like having like consistency even against like the very top teams, right? Like I don't know the schedule exactly this year, but I don't know if you play like Utah and Arizona is probably going to be your tougher teams in the Big 12, but you don't want to have any games like Oregon and UCLA, even if it's not all on you or all your fault, you still like, you got to avoid those type of performances, I think, to get drafted number one.
Yeah. We got to have a little bit of a running game to help him out this year for sure. And again, I think like some of the things that we noticed and I think it happened a little bit earlier in the season as well, but maybe I just noticed it more. But sometimes drifting more back, or like back in the pocket rather than stepping up. Again, that's a lot easier said than done when you've been hit so much. But that's I would love to see him grow in his pocket manipulation as well, because he's only going to get better the better he is at that. And I would also say I love the fact that he kept his interceptions down. Sometimes, and I think this is just part of the competitiveness that he has. I don't think it's to save his touchdown or his touchdown interception ratio, anything like that. I just think he's a competitive guy. But sometimes if you got to scrap a play, just throw that thing out of bounds. Just make sure it gets past the line of scrimmage. because sometimes, we saw him taking sacks, holding on to the ball, trying to find that guy open late while he's being run down by a couple of guys.
Yep.
And hopefully this is a lot smaller of an issue this year with having a better offensive line, so we're able to protect him better. But those are a couple things that I'm guessing NFL people will want to see, him getting rid of the ball quickly, when it not just going to a receiver, but also, hey, when you just got to scrap the play and then manipulating that pocket a little bit better. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think, as a quarterback, it's easy to kind of just drift in the pocket when you're getting hit and you hit. And like you mentioned a really good point. Quarterbacks are so competitive, and what makes Shedeur so good is a lot of things, but being competitive and like not letting a play die. Like you saw several plays from last season. A few come to mind, like the touchdown to the freshman against USC, and some other plays where he scrambled and bought time and had some great plays. And so with that also comes like the negative plays and the groundings or getting sacked or holding the ball too long, right? So you take some and you live with some of those actions as well. But I think you're right. It's finding ways to mitigate where that happens. And so I think it's finding ways to get rid of the ball and get out quick. Like we talked about this last season, like where are the running back screens, like some more screens, some more, just get the screens of the receivers, whatever it may be. It doesn't even have to have the, like, you don't have to go into it with this play saying, hey, we hope we break a big play, or we hope we get a big gain. Like it can be 1 or 2 yards, but just keeps the defense somewhat on it. So you can be using that play to set something up, right? And so I think that's probably the next growth and step for Shedeur. And but I mean, like you mentioned, took care of the ball, and every quarterback's got areas to grow. So
yeah. Totally. I want to give a shout out really quick here. Paul Simmons, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. That really means a lot. I know that we got to start ending things here in the next few minutes, Steven, but I did want to ask you this question. With the offense this next year, working with Pat Shurmur, kind of alluded to just a second ago how hopefully we're running some plays that then set up other ones. One of the, I think, pitfalls of the offense this past year is that Sean Lewis didn't like to script plays at the beginning. Obviously, Pat Shurmur is going to be doing that, coming from where he comes from, NFL, everything like that. I would love for you to speak on if there are any viewers here that aren't familiar with like why it might be very important to script plays. You might want to script your first 10 to 20 plays. What are some of the advantages that you get when you do that? Yeah,
sure. And every game I played in, we had it was like a 15 play script that we would go off of. And Sean Lewis knows more about football than I can dream of. And I think he's a hell of an offensive coach. So I think there's obviously there's so many ways to go about it. Right. And so Sean Lewis, Pat Shurmur, whatever, I think there's so many ways to go about it. And people way smarter than me think super highly of Sean Lewis as offensive play caller. But I think when you script a play, I think you're able to, one, what you're for sure going in, like the play wise, for sure what you're getting started. And so you have that kind of like visualization, if you will, as a player, as a coach, of like, hey, we're calling this play. Like we know we have to be prepared for these 10, 15 plays. And then of those plays, you find out, hey, let's say we have 15 plays. We have 5 run plays, 5 straight drop back passing plays, and then 5 play action plays, right? So 3 different categories of plays. And now you have 15 plays, 5 each, and 5 each, 3 different categories, 5 plays in each category. And so now you have like a decent, some decent data of like what plays are working against this defense, what aren't, right? So if I have 5 straight drop passing plays and I go 1 for 5 and 3 yards and a pick, okay, maybe that's not the recipe for success this game. But if the play action plays, I'm 4 for 5 for 100 yards and a touchdown, maybe, attacking them with play action may be the way to go this game as opposed to straight drop back. And those are just basic broad examples, but it gives you a few plays of a few different type of schemes and a few different options that you can build on, later on in the game. So I think that's kind of the big advantage. You get to see maybe what's working, what's not working against the team. And then later on you can react to that. But you can also get married to the script. Like you hear about coaches who are really good, like the first drives, like they're really good because They have a script like Coach Sarkisian for Texas. Announcers always talk about, man, that opening drive was always good. He has a great script.
Yes.
But then you have to make adjustments and make changes and go from there. So you don't want to get married to it, but I think it's of course a good option to have.
Yeah. I'm going to be looking forward to see how the offense looks this year. I think we'll have some of the stuff that we saw success with this past year, obviously, but it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing is scripted out week one, especially against North Dakota State. What kind of sets we're going to be running. Will we see some more two tight end personnel? Will we see a variance in shotgun or pistol, maybe a little bit more under center? I think it's all I'm very excited to see how this whole thing develops with this offense having a little bit more of a pro style bend to it. But we know college is still a different game than the NFL. You can't just plug in an NFL playbook here and think that it's going to be good. We're going to need Pat Shurmur to, really, I think, get creative in some senses because, this is his first time, I think, calling or developing a playbook for a college offense, which I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, having him been in the NFL for 20, 30 years or however long he's been coaching. He's been coaching for so long, man.
Right.
But Steven, thank you so much for your time, man. Guys, we're gonna be doing this very regularly. Whether that's, I don't know if you're cool like doing it every Monday morning or every other Monday morning, but I think that we can have this thing work consistently, and let's just be talking a lot more college quarterbacks as well, using this time for that. But for my viewers who aren't subscribed to you yet, again, guys, go down and do it. Links in the description of my video. But what do you got coming up on your channel that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so we'll keep kind of covering like the major college quarterback topics, if you will, like with the Will Howard stuff, with Chip Kelly going to Ohio State. We'll have some breakdowns over how that influences Will Howard and why he fits in that. And so we'll keep it covering that way. And then I haven't done this in a few years, but when we first started QB Spotlight, we did some film breakdowns over the quarterbacks in the draft. So we'll have 5 or 6 breakdowns over some quarterbacks in the draft. And once spring ball starts, we'll be covering in any quarterbacks spring ball topic competitions, and that's when we'll really start kind of ramping up. We got some cool guests coming on the podcast too, some current college quarterbacks and some former guys that if you like behind the scenes kind of stories and kind of what a schedule is like in a D1 quarterback or an NFL quarterback, then you may find that interesting.
Ooh, I love it. Can you name any of the quarterbacks that are coming on yet, or is that too early?
Far the quarterbacks we've had so far: Tanner Morgan, the old Minnesota quarterback with the Steelers and Vikings this past year for practice squads and stuff, probably the best quarterback in Minnesota history. And then Curtis Warwick, we just put his out last week. Indiana quarterback, Ohio quarterback who just transferred. And then we got a former Notre Dame quarterback coming on. We got a former, or that will be released this week. And then we got one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks in history coming on, former Boise State quarterback, and he'll be on this week, and we'll put that out next week. So we got some cool stuff and some cool guys coming on.
I love it. Well, y'all, please be sure again to go subscribe to what Steven's doing over at the QB Spotlight. Steven, really appreciate your time this morning. Can't wait to connect again soon. Again, shout out to the chat. You guys were lively and fire as always, especially appreciative of that early in the mornings. Again, shout out to Paul Simmons again for your generosity. Really appreciate it. I'm sure I will be back later today. So I will see you then. And as always, everybody, go Buffs. All right. Thanks again.